Yo, what's up, guys? So if I told you guys that Jesus was just a metaphor for the sun, S-U-N, the light of the world, the the rising divine light, um, would you believe me, or would you think that I was crazy? So I'm an artist. I've been an artist for 20 years. I started in LA in the year 2002, late that year. It was almost the year 2003. Um, I was a young kid, 20 years old, I think. Um, I was in need of work, so I just so happened to go to LA, Venice Beach, because I was working at Bally Total Fitness. I was a personal trainer, and but I was kind of getting burnt out with that. So I just so happened to go to Venice Beach. I see some artists selling their artwork, and I decide to possibly, give it a shot. I was always very artsy as a kid. I could always draw well as a kid. So I thought, let me see if I can make some money off of this, right? Start taking it seriously. Um, these are two pieces behind me here. I like doing kind of abstract faces and stuff. So I gave it a shot. I started selling my artwork in Venice Beach. I struggled, I ain't gonna lie. It was no joke when you first start drawing and trying to sell your artwork. Any artist knows that. After a couple years of, more like a year and a half of kind of struggling as an artist, I moved back to where I went to high school, which is Oklahoma, in the year 2004. And I was 22 by that time. So I show up to Oklahoma. I have a few drawings with me. I go to the local college and I show the teacher, and she gives me an art scholarship. So that's when I officially start studying art. Now I got to say that I was obsessed with art once I started in LA. Once I started selling my drawings, I devoted myself to art. I was just obsessed with the romanticism, I guess you'd say, of the artists. Picasso, Vincent van Gogh, Salvador Dali were some of my top artists that I looked up to, and I really wanted to be like them. And so I just want to emphasize how obsessed I was with the idea of being an artist. So 2 years later, I'm in Oklahoma. I go to college. I get my art scholarship. I start studying art, and it's not easy really, dividing your time with being an artist, because being an artist, being a good artist, you need to generate artwork. You can't have two or three or four or five or 20 pieces and compete with artists that have hundreds. You like they say, there are levels to this, and quickly you realize, as time goes on, when you're 30 and 40, whatever, you realize your body of work needs to be serious. So it becomes difficult when you're studying art, right? Because the same thing with studying art. You can't tell somebody that you study art and all you know is Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Ninja Turtles, Donatello, and Picasso, and Vincent van Gogh, and things like that, right? People are quickly going to realize that you really don't know very much. You just know the basics, right? So I started to realize that, and I started to, once a year or two went by studying art, I realized, man, I'm not painting as much as I need to. I'm never going to be that great artist that I wanted to be in the first place if I just study for the rest of my life and I don't have a serious body of work. So I just want to emphasize that because it's a real struggle doing both. But that's just what I've been doing for the last 20 years. Just trying to divide my time from studying art to producing and generating, a serious body of work. So, sticking to the topic here of Jesus being a sun god, after studying for about 10 years, um, I basically felt that I knew enough, everything I needed to know about art, from the beginning of art, I guess what's called, the canon of art history, right? The collection of art, paintings, artists, movements, the collection that they teach you in school, right? No matter what art book you get, you're gonna see the same artists, the same paintings, the same movements. It's called the canon of art history, right? From cave art, from Lascaux to the Dark Ages, Byzantine, 300, 400, when it's mostly religious paintings, Christianity. Unless you go to like the Middle East, and then they have, um, Islamic art. But most of what they teach us here in the U.S. is European art for the most part. So a lot of Christian art pieces in the year, 400, 500, the Dark Ages. And then the Dark Ages end, and the Renaissance comes up, right? It's like the rebirth of great art. That's where you get the Ninja Turtles, right? Raphael, Donatello, Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci. Then it moves on to Mannerism, Baroque, Rococo movements, kind of like the timeline in art, right? And then obviously you got individual artists, Paul, not Paul Cezanne, I want to name Peter Paul Rubens. He's more of a mannerism artist. I don't want to bore you guys with all these individual artists, right? But Impressionism, Post-Impressionism, Monet, Manet, Cezanne, whoever, you just kind of go on with these guys. But 10 years in, I was just burnt out. I thought, well, I know enough about these guys. I don't need to know more, So I moved east, right? You start going east to things you don't know about. Mythology, more religious paintings. I really didn't know much about religious paintings. I knew the pieces, if it was the crucifixion or the Annunciation or the whatever the content was. I was able to relate it to the artist, but I really didn't know deeply, religion or how it all started, right, with mythology and everything. So there's a painting called Saturn Devouring His Son. And it's a really popular piece. I would always look at it and not really know much about it. So that's an example, right? Once I got into it, I realized, well, Saturn is kind of like Kronos. Saturn is the Roman version of Kronos in Greece. In Greece, it's Kronos, same character. They just adapt them to a different civilization. When Rome conquered Greece, they took on these ideas of Zeus. They named Zeus Jupiter. Their dad is, for Rome, it's Saturn. For Greece, it's Kronos. So that's just an example of how I didn't know the background to all these, right? So with Saturn devouring his son, he hears of a prophecy that his next son is gonna take over and become king. His next son is gonna kill him and become king or god. So Saturn is like, well, shoot, I don't want my next son to take my place. So he starts eating his sons. So the wife, can't think of her name right now, Rhea, I think it is. So Rhea might be the wife for Kronos. It's kind of easy to confuse these people, but they're basically the same person. They just change the names. So she's like, well, I don't want my son getting eaten, so I'm gonna trick Saturn and wrap this stone around with the cloth and then give it to Saturn. So Saturn gets this, what he thinks is a baby, Jupiter, and eats him. And, Jupiter is able to live on, grow up, and take the place of Saturn. Those are the types of things I started learning more about because I did not know much about those things. So for about the last year and a half, that's what I've been studying on. And that's how I came to realize there's a lot of sun gods. And that's where I came to realize I think Jesus is just a sun god, right? S-U-N. So it all starts in Egypt. And that is one thing they do teach us here in the U.S. Egypt is a foundation in terms of civilization. With Mesopotamia, they're the beginnings of civilization, the cradle of civilization, along with Persia. I consider those the three great foundations of civilization: Persia, Mesopotamia, and Egypt. So with Egypt, you got Osiris. He's their god. Osiris has a wife. She's Isis. They have a kid named Horu or Horus. So Osiris has a brother named Set. Set is jealous of Osiris, so he kills him, chops him up into 13 pieces. Isis, Osiris's wife, sees him, cries for him, because she's also a god or goddess. She's able to put them back together. And Osiris resurrects. This is the first time there's a resurrection. He goes up to heaven. He's God. He impregnates Isis. They have a kid named Horus or Horu. And they're worshipped in Egypt for thousands of years. I think somewhere around 4000 BC, so 6,000 years ago. They've had this religion, this belief system there. Every spring, when barley and grain and wheat come back from the winter, it's symbolically Osiris. When they make bread out of wheat and they eat the bread, it's symbolically eating the body of Osiris. When they make beer out of barley, symbolically it's the blood of Osiris. They celebrate, obviously, every spring. It's a celebration of the rebirth of Osiris. And that idea was taken to Greece when Greece conquers Egypt. From Greece, when Rome conquers Greece, they adapt their ideas, and then in Rome it becomes the Holy Roman Empire, and they become Christian. And these ideas all have a foundation or a root in Egypt. So Osiris, his wife is Isis. Isis, they have all kinds of statues and statuettes, figurines of these gods. One is Isis, the wife of Osiris. She's sitting down with her baby Horu. That's copied or taken by Greece, and it pretty much becomes the Pietà. Look up Pietà. It's Mother Mary carrying Jesus. Very, very popular image, very, very popular imagery, painting or sculpture. All has its roots with Isis and Horu. We're talking 4,000 years before Christianity. This was the Egyptian religion. So much more that you can talk about with Egypt. There's a pyramid text which has the Annunciation when an angel comes down and tells Isis that she's going to have a child. That also gets taken to Europe and incorporated with Christianity years later, obviously. Thousands of years later, when Christianity comes and is invented. Persia, the other foundation of civilization, they have Ahura Mazda is the founder of Zoroastrianism. Also a great, sophisticated, developed, advanced religion for the Persian Empire. They invent hell and the devil. They have a character, I can't think of his name right now, who is pretty much like the devil, before the devil. The idea of the devil is taken from this idea. There were a lot of writers there that would write spells trying to keep the evil away. And then this place where the bad souls would go after you die, hell. So they invented that, 2,000 to 3,000 years before Christianity. There is Cyrus the Great, but that's a little bit later. I'll probably come back to him. So the third great civilization or great foundation of civilization is Mesopotamia, Sumeria, Babylon. Sumeria and Babylon are in Mesopotamia. So they have Hammurabi, he's a real king. Hammurabi has the laws of Hammurabi. Check those out. Anything I'm saying, please check it out. I don't have that much time to go into detail with these things. It takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of memory to remember these details. A lot of times you end up messing up. So, and then, getting sidetracked. So I'm trying not to do all that, but please check out anything that I'm saying. Fact check me. So Hammurabi in Mesopotamia has the laws of Hammurabi. So again, all these things are taken from these three foundational civilizations They're in the Middle East, and they're in Africa, in that area, 2,000 to 3,000 years, even close to 4,000 years before Christianity. Hammurabi, the Epic of Gilgamesh, it has a flood story. The Epic of Gilgamesh, again, don't want to go into the story. Just check it out. There's the flood story in that one. There is Enuma Elish. Enuma Elish is a more of a creation story. Tiamat and Apsu are like the father and mother gods that have kids. Not to go into the detail of all the pantheon. So the Greek pantheon is influenced by this pantheon. This is where it originates. The pantheon of gods, right? This god begot this son, this god begot this person. It's kind of like the Bible. The Bible also gets, influenced or draws from these foundational civilizations. 4,000 years before Christianity, 4,000 years before the Bible, 4,000 years before those religions, or that religion. Enuma Elish, also known as the 7 tablets of civilization. 7 tablets, I think, of civilization, I think it is. The first humans being created by mud, or I think it's mud or clay. That's Enuma Elish. Also in Egypt. So Mesopotamia and Egypt are kind of going on at the same time. Same with Persia. They're just foundations, and they're kind of inventing stuff at the same time. The pyramid text in Egypt also have, I think, Ma'at, their god, another god, right? Because there's a lot of gods. It's making the first humans out of clay. That's in Egypt. Not quite sure which was first. They're both 3,000 to 4,000 years before the Bible and Christianity, so I know they're 3,000 years before that. But within each other, which one came first, Mesopotamia or Egypt? Not quite sure. I'm gonna have to check that out. So probably a lot more I can say about these things. I already talked about the bread, the grain god Osiris. Every spring they celebrated him. It was symbolic for his body. Wine and beer out of barley was symbolically him. Eating, his body. Let's see. I'll probably just skip over to when Alexander the Great conquers Africa, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Persia. That's the next big step. That's the year 323, approximately, BC. 323 BC. So we're talking the great 3 foundational civilizations have reigned and developed and have become more and more sophisticated, developing their ideas, their belief systems. So here comes Alexander the Great. He conquers these lands. He takes all these ideas and he takes them back home to Greece. Alexander the Great is obsessed with Cyrus the Great, not Osiris, but Cyrus, I mentioned I was going to go back to Cyrus. He was a king. They said nobody deserves the name the Great after their name except for Cyrus the Great. Cyrus the Great, every time he conquered a place, he was better than the prior leader they had. He was more just. He didn't have any slaves. He paid everybody. He treated people well, and he was known for that. He freed the Jews later on, but I'm getting ahead of myself. But yeah, well, no, I'm right at around that time. But anyways, Alexander the Great, admired him. Now, don't confuse Osiris with Cyrus. Osiris is the god 4,000 years earlier, 4,000 years older in Egypt. Cyrus is the king in Persia, but he's 200 years older than Alexander. Cyrus is around the year 500 BC. Alexander is the year 300 BC. So 200 years after Cyrus. So Alexander goes to Persia. When he conquers it, he goes to Persepolis, or wherever Cyrus is buried, and gives his honors to Cyrus. He always looked up to Cyrus. Again, look these things up. There's like huge long stories when it comes to these things. I'm only able just to mention them and move on because there's just so much to talk about. So Alexander the Great becomes a pharaoh in Egypt. He adopts their belief system. The fact that a pharaoh is a conduit to Osiris, the god Osiris, meaning he has a connection. He is appointed by God Osiris to govern the people. That's it's a great system. Obviously, the people are going to look up to you as king, as pharaoh, believe that you're appointed by God, and that you communicate, you channel, you have a connection with God, therefore you're partly divine. And Alexander loves that idea. He becomes pharaoh. He dies, and his best friend, General Ptolemy, becomes pharaoh, and he invents a new god, another god named Serapis. Serapis is a mix of Egypt and Greece, because by this time people are kind of both Greek and Egyptian. You have kind of like gentrification coming in from Europe, from Greece into Egypt. So they got to come up with a god that everybody likes. They come up with Serapis. Check him out. Also, Serapis is a made-up god that looks more European. He looks more Greek. There are plenty of statues of Serapis sitting down, looking kind of like Zeus. Again, where a lot of the God imagery or Jesus imagery comes from. Serapis, let's see. A lot of the ideas are now moving to Greece because Alexander conquered Egypt and Mesopotamia. He also conquered Mesopotamia, Babylon, and Persia. So a lot of these ideas, so I can't emphasize the wealth of information, the wealth of knowledge that we're talking 4,000 years of knowledge, belief systems that these great three civilizations, Mesopotamia, Persia, and Egypt, have developed, that now Alexander the Great is able to take back to Greece. And this is when Greece and Europe first take on these ideas and start adapting and adopting these ideas to Europe to